The year is 1945. The smoke over Hiroshima and Nagasaki has barely cleared. In the streets of London, Paris, and Moscow, people are dancing. The Great Crusade is over. The Nazis are defeated, and the Imperial Japanese sun has set. But as the physical rubble is cleared, an invisible barrier is being constructed. It is a wall made of suspicion, built by two allies who no longer have a common enemy to hold them together. This is the birth of a world divided, a world where the temperature of conflict would drop to a freezing, bitter cold.
To understand the Cold War, you have to understand the map. At the Yalta and Potsdam conferences, the Big Three, Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill, carved up the globe like a Thanksgiving turkey. Joseph Stalin, having lost 27 million Soviet citizens to the Nazi invasion, wanted a buffer zone of friendly states in Eastern Europe. To him, this was security. To the West, it looked like an empire in the making.
Winston Churchill, now out of office but still wielding the power of rhetoric, travels to a small college in Fulton, Missouri. He leans into the microphone and utters the words that define the next 4 decades. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. The audience is stunned. The alliance is officially dead. In Washington, a diplomat named George Kennan sends a long telegram. His message is simple. The Soviets are expansionist by nature. They cannot be reasoned with, only contained. This becomes the Truman Doctrine. The United States commits itself to supporting free peoples resisting subjugation. The lines are drawn. It is no longer about reconstruction. It is about ideological survival.
The first true test isn't a battle of bullets, but a battle of logistics. Berlin, situated deep within the Soviet-occupied zone of Germany, is split. Stalin closes the roads and railways, hoping to starve the West out of the city. But the West doesn't retreat. For nearly a year, planes land every few minutes in the Berlin Airlift, carrying coal, flour, and even chocolate. Stalin blinks first. He lifts the blockade, but the message is clear. Berlin is the front line. By 1949, the stakes reach the stratosphere. The Soviet Union detonates its first atomic bomb. The American monopoly on nuclear terror is over. Suddenly, the world realizes that any future hot war between these giants wouldn't just be a repeat of World War II. It would be the end of civilization itself. In China, Mao Zedong's communist forces seize power, sending the nationalists fleeing to Taiwan. 1/4 of the world's population has just gone red. In the United States, panic sets in. The Red Scare begins. If China can fall, where will it stop? The theory of containment is put to its first bloody test on a peninsula called Korea.
The Korean War is the first proxy war. It is a brutal 3-year seesaw of violence where American and UN forces fight North Korean and Chinese troops. Millions die for a border that ends up exactly where it started, at the 38th parallel. It proves that the Cold War will be fought in the shadows and on the fringes, using other nations as the board for the superpowers' chess match. As the 1950s dawn, the terror becomes domestic. In America, families build fallout shelters in their backyards. Children are taught to duck and cover under their school desks, as if a piece of wood could protect them from the heat of 1,000 suns. The concept of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, becomes the bedrock of international relations. If you pull the trigger, you die too. Stalin dies in 1953, and a new figure emerges, Nikita Khrushchev. He is boisterous, unpredictable, and determined to prove that communism is the future. He famously tells Western diplomats, "We will bury you." But he isn't just talking about war. He's talking about economics, science, and the very stars themselves. October 4th, 1957. A rhythmic beep, beep, beep broadcasts from the sky. The Soviet Union has launched Sputnik,
the first man-made satellite. The space race has begun. To the average citizen, it's a scientific marvel. To the generals, it's a terrifying demonstration. If the Soviets can put a satellite into orbit, they can put a nuclear warhead on Washington, D.C. in 30 minutes.
In 1961, the tension in Berlin reaches a breaking point. Thousands are fleeing from the east to the west every day. To stop the brain drain, the East German government, with Soviet backing, does the unthinkable. In the dead of night, they string up barbed wire. Within weeks, it is a concrete wall, topped with glass and guarded by snipers. The Berlin Wall becomes the physical manifestation of the Iron Curtain.
The world comes closer to the brink than ever before in October 1962. U-2 spy planes photograph Soviet nuclear missiles being installed in Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida. For 13 days, President John F. Kennedy and Khrushchev stare each other down. The world holds its breath, waiting for the flash of light that signals the end. At the last moment, a deal is struck. The missiles leave Cuba. The world survives by a hair's breadth.
The 1960s and 70s see the focus shift to the jungles of Southeast Asia. Vietnam becomes a quagmire for the United States. It is a war fought on television, tearing American society apart at the seams. It proves that even a superpower cannot easily impose its will on a determined nationalist movement backed by rival ideologies.
While America struggles in Vietnam, the Soviet Union faces its own internal rot. The command economy is stagnating. People are waiting in lines for hours for a loaf of bread, while the government spends billions on tanks. A brief period of détente, a relaxation of tensions, sees leaders shaking hands and signing arms reduction treaties, but the peace is fragile. In 1979, the Soviets invade Afghanistan to prop up a failing communist regime. It becomes their Vietnam, a decade-long drain on resources and morale. The United States retaliates by funding the Mujahideen, the local resistance fighters. The Cold War is now a global game of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, a strategy that would have long-lasting, unforeseen consequences.
The 1980s bring a change in tone. Ronald Reagan enters the White House, calling the Soviet Union an evil empire. He ramps up military spending, proposing the Star Wars missile defense system. He bets that the United States can outspend the Soviets until they break.
Enter Mikhail Gorbachev. He is younger, more energetic, and he realizes the Soviet Union is dying. He introduces two words to the global vocabulary: glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. He wants to save communism by fixing it. But once you give people a little bit of freedom, they tend to want all of it. The Miracle Year. Across Eastern Europe, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, the people stand up. The People's Power movements sweep away the old communist guards. In the past, the Soviets would have sent in the tanks, but Gorbachev refuses to shoot. November 9th, 1989. A confused East German official accidentally announces that travel restrictions are lifted. Thousands of people rush to the Berlin Wall. The guards, with no orders to fire, step aside. People climb the wall, dancing on top of it, chipping away at the concrete with hammers and chisels. The wall hasn't just fallen, it has been demolished by the will of the people. By Christmas Day, 1991, the Soviet Union itself ceases to exist. The hammer and sickle flag is lowered over the Kremlin for the last time, replaced by the Russian tricolor. The Cold War is over, not with a bang, but with a whimper and a signature. The Cold War was a period of history where humanity lived under the shadow of its own destruction. It was a time of immense scientific progress, terrifying close calls, and a global struggle for the soul of civilization. It shaped the borders of our nations, the technology in our pockets, and the way we view power. It is a story of how all of us nearly lost everything, and how we managed, against the odds, to keep the world turning.
As we look at the world today, we see the echoes of the Cold War in new rivalries and old tensions. History, it seems, does not end, It merely changes its clothes. But the lesson remains. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to manage it without destroying the very world we are fighting for. This has been the history of us all.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.